Hi Jennifer, you did a nice job with your series. Whenever I start to evaluate these projects, I always look at the photographs to begin with. And I definitely have to say I was not sure where you're going with this, and so it just kind of goes to show how having a narrative sometimes can be subtle, sometimes can be a little more obvious, but as long as you pull it together, then that's obviously the goal for this kind of series. Including parallel lines that kind of trail off in the distance, we call that a one-point perspective, certainly works, and when you have an image that's very graphic like this, I think it's especially obvious, but once you identify what the theme is for the series, the concept, then it's easy to see where you've got that going on and on. And here you're talking about the sidewalk, but we also see it in the way that the trees, the road, even the fence here. All of these kind of forms of repetition are a very good thing in an image. Train tracks, you said your difficulty here was keeping yourself out of the image. Certainly the different times of day the sun can be problematic. You were shooting with your iPhone, so that I think limits your options a little bit. If you want to avoid that with different kinds of camera, the obvious choice is to use a little bit more of a telephoto lens where you can start your composition beyond where your shadow ends. Either way, I think that you managed it just fine with this image. And here your morning run again. I think this is the least obvious in the fact that, I mean, we still see it here with the fence, of course, but because it's a dark night, we see trailing off, and so we kind of lose some of that one-point perspective just because it's dark and in shadow. That said, we get the same thing here with the grass, and that works, and we see it also to a certain extent with the parking lot, although there's probably not enough to really include that fully. In terms of the way you edited your images, they are primarily monochromatic, and then you have the one color. That's a difficult thing. So when we look at a scene, our eyes are naturally drawn to color, and green is actually one that we're especially programmed to be responsive to. Anything that's in color is going to be more important in a series than something that is in black and white or monochromatic. In that regard, this image here becomes the most significant one in the series, and I think that arguably, for what you're going for, this one probably should have been. Probably would have been better off converting this to black and white. Doing that, you could do that here in Photoshop. One of the tools that works really well for that is this black and white adjustment. And the reason I like this so well is that you are able to obviously convert to black and white in a way that's similar to just plain desaturating it, taking the colors out. But more importantly, you can actually adjust the tonal relationships of the different colors. And so this stretch of grass here is actually one of the stronger examples of the one-point perspective vanishing point. And so maybe we want to brighten that up. And so you can see the green can be selectively brightened without anything else being affected in the image. This was a big yellow light, and it's kind of bright and not really adding to what you were, not really adding to the concept that you're going for. So we can darken that down a little bit. You can see, of course, the grass has some yellow in it too, so you need to be a little careful with that, but you kind of get the idea where this can be a very useful tool. Obviously there's some red in the light, so you can dial that back, and now the fence becomes more prominent. So tools like this can really go a long way towards helping you to emphasize what your concept is for an image. In terms of the colors, similar to that one, this one has a bit of a reddish tint to it, which I assume was done on purpose, not just a random editing thing. But again, the same thing could be done just to go ahead and make that completely neutral. And again, because there is a tint, you can see how the sliders can be used to really emphasize or de-emphasize the red tones in the image. Finally, for this last image, you said you had a hard time positioning yourself to exclude things that you didn't want. And certainly doing that in the camera is a very, very good approach. The more that you can do at the time that you're taking the image, the better it is, generally speaking. But that doesn't mean that you can't address some of these things that you didn't like after the fact in post-production. I know that you used a Windows editor, a photo editor, but you can do the same sort of thing there that you can do in Photoshop. Here is an example. What I'm going to do is I'm going to remove all of this top corner, and you can see how easy that might be. If you come over here under the healing family of tools, there's one called Patch Tool. And the key for using this is you want to do it on a separate layer, because if you make a mistake, it's easy to remove that. If you did it right on the background layer, then if you erased that, then you would be erasing, the image itself. But when you do that on a separate layer, you need to make sure that we have Sample All Layers checked, and you'd like this to be content aware. These two, the structure and the color, can be changed after the fact, and sometimes it's hard to know which one is going to be a better effect. So I just leave it wherever I use it last, and go ahead and draw a circle around the area that you want to remove. And then once your cursor is inside that circle, just click and drag it down to an area where you can cover it up. Now what you can see what happened is that because this area of asphalt was significantly smaller than the area we're going, just because of, again, we're working on a vanishing point here, we've got much wider bars than we do here. We didn't really affect that part of the image, and so it's just a matter of going and getting cleanup. Now I think this edit here is actually pretty clean, and so we don't need to change the structure and color. Color, of course, isn't going to really make any difference because this is basically a black and white image, but you can see how if I move the structure all the way up, we bring in more of that asphalt texture, as opposed to if we keep it all the way down. Oftentimes somewhere in the middle is the right balance, and it just depends on the image. Now seeing that, maybe I like to have a little bit more of that texture in there, so I'm going to go and redo this part just to make it all balance out. And sometimes you need to go back and do this 2 or 3 times. But overall you get a really nice effect in a pretty simple sort of edit. So just to recap, I think that your concept was very good. Sometimes the more subtle the concept, you could do just fine with that, and it's just a matter of tying that together with a written narrative, which you've done perfectly. One last thing is, if you continue this kind of imagery, definitely consider processing all of the images in the series in a similar way that makes them much more cohesive in general. Let me know if you have any questions.